Kia ora, everyone. Thank you to this meeting of the Social Sustainability Committee. Committee, not subcommittee, just putting a line through that. Kia ora, everyone. Great to have you here. Thank you very much for being here. We're just Nigel will be here shortly. He's just off getting caffeinated. And welcome to you, Kim, online as well, just acknowledging you there. Rob, you okay to do the blessing, please?
Yes. Kia ora, Chairman Martin. As we deliberate on the issues before us, we trust that we will reflect positively on the communities we serve. Let us all seek to be effective and just, so that with courage, vision and energy, we provide positive leadership in the spirit of harmony and compassion.
Kia ora. That's fantastic. Thank you, Rob. Item 3, apologies. Do I have any apologies in at all? No, that's a no. Do I need to accept that? No. Okay, lovely. Thank you. Number 4, declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda. Anyone? Going once, going twice. Gone. Fantastic. Number 5, sorry? I'll throw some birdseed at you. Public speaking time, and for items in relation to the agenda, there are no members of the public registered to speak, so we'll move from 5 to 6. This is a new one, deputations. Point 6, deputations?
It is, yes, but we have none.
We have none, okay. Need to get a better understanding what that's about next time, please. Number 7, we're moving to members' business. A, leave of absence. Anybody? No? Fantastic. Matters of an urgent nature. Nothing's been brought to my attention. Anyone have anything of an urgent nature? No. C, I'm going to use Chair's discretion and move that to the end of the meeting, and see how we go for time. We're on a relatively tight time frame with this meeting, and see how we go there. I'm sure we'll get some members' business. So from there we move to 8, which is updates. We have 8.1 housing update and 8.2 update from CAG. That's what we have in here. I've used Chair discretion to swap the two around as Ian's an external. It was nice to sort of get him up front here first. And so introducing Ian Powell here as from CAG. He's chair of the Access Group as such. And there are 5 different working streams in the CAG program. At the last meeting, we had Graham here who was talking to us around the mental health side of things. Ian's here today to give us a rundown on the access side of things, exciting stuff. This particular one is one that I'm very, 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 very interested in. But what we'll do over the next 3 meetings as well is we'll have a representative, hopefully the person from each one of those committees or working groups. The idea is to bring you guys up to speed with what CAG's working on as such, as part of the kaupapa of us or them sitting under our committee as such. So Ian, I shall leave it up to you, and Chris and Gina.
Thanks, Martin. I've been called many things, but I've never been called an external before. So.
Been an internal, bro.
We were going to comment.
I guess it might be marginally better than. Oh, sorry. Marginally better than being called an internal. I don't know, but. Do you want
me to do that?
No, I can. Can you hear me okay from here? Is that okay?
Okay, so there's somebody online.
Oh, online. All right, well, I'll sit down. Probably easier. Yeah. There's a reason for using the term treacle in this, a treacle reduction strategy, which is not a CAG terminology, it's my terminology to describe the process we have to go through. And it originates from a recent discussion with a GP leader, and this is in the context of capitation funding for primary health care. And he was describing how you have to work through it with Te Whatuora Health New Zealand. And he described it as trying to wade through thick treacle. And I thought that was quite apt. So that photo there, that slide there, just doesn't come out too well. The unfortunate thing is that I couldn't find a photo on treacle or people waking through it. So I had to make do with mud. But just imagine. There is a similarity, and Now, the approach that we are taking in this is, first of all, to the importance of being evidence-based. We can't just be based on soundbite. That's what central government does. We want to go drill further into actually what is the data, what is the information about the health needs in the community. And then also being politically savvy because we've got to wade through treacle. Now, our objective is to develop what is, we're calling it a compelling case at the moment, because that's kind of the objective, to have a case that's compelling, and it's sort of the name has sort of assumed a bit of a life of its own. And it's about to persuade Te Whatu Ora to prepare a business case to collaborate with us on an innovative publicly provided integrated health service in Kapiti. And we're basing it on the existing Kapiti Health Centre, which is Te Whatu Ora owned, in principle going upwards and outwards. What I'm doing here today is just simply going through the direction of travel, if you like, rather than actually too many specifics, but you'll see where we're coming from, hopefully by the end. Now, we're using the term polyclinic, and more of it as a term of a convenience at the moment, but essentially, many clinics at KHC. Both community, but straddling the divide between community, including primary and community care, and secondary or hospital, lower level hospital care. Less complex, so it's not acute. It's things that can be deferred. It's not emergency and it's not surgical. So we're not talking about building operating theatres or anything like that. But hopefully also, but including chronic illnesses, which are those illnesses that just go on and on and on and require continuing treatment. It's one-stop. It's like a one-stop shop as much as sensible. I'm using the word ish. Well, it's not a word, but the letters ish. And well, I was a union negotiator for over 30 years, and the word ish actually had a lot going for it in negotiations, what you could get below the radar. But to give an example, should it include pharmacy or not? Well, there may be a case for it, there may be not. We might be better off with the pharmacy outlets that we have at the moment. They might be sufficient for our needs. But that'll be something that can be worked through down the track. Co-design, that's some of the words we're using is the language also of the health system and Te Whatu Ora in particular. So we sort of like, when I first started pursuing this, initially sounding out Te Whatu Ora on it, I deliberately used words like innovation. So they have a division there called innovation and improvement. So I went there first of all and then migrated around others until we got somewhere. But we want to co-design that as much as possible with Te Whatu Ora in terms of the business case. The compelling case we're having, the relationship with Te Whatu Ora at the moment is they are there for some things and not for others, and they're not there for the development of it other than providing data if we require it. But I don't think we will necessarily. And it is quite consistent, very consistent with both the health strategy that's under development here, which is a promising development, and also the government's rural health strategy. And we had a teleconference with them, some officials recently on that, and it was just one of the things I took out of it. And I never really appreciated it, but for the purposes of health, rural is 31 or over 30 k's away from a major 24/7 public hospital. So we are completely rural in that context. So these are, I won't go through all of these, but that's the kind of scope of things that we would like to see expanded potentially over time. And I emphasise over time. There is already a general practice located within it, and that's actually a big plus because there aren't, the only place I'm aware of, I'm confidently aware of, that has something like that, primary care and some lower level hospital care on the same premise, same site, is Golden Bay in the Tasman. But their population is a fraction of ours, their population density is a fraction of ours, so there are quite different contrasts. Horowhenua may well come close. They just need to drill down a bit more on that. So some of the things, but that actually helps make it innovative as well, because the general practice there is a tenant in the facility. Some of we would certainly want to expand the outpatient clinics that we presently have from visiting specialists and also allied health professionals. An opportunity for post-operative care, really linking in also linked in terms of what makes good clinical sense, diagnostic support, so you don't have to traipse around everywhere. Diagnostic support that goes with the level of care that's being provided. District health nurses are already there, but there's greater scope for nursing clinics, including the role of quite highly qualified nurse practitioners. Telehealth in different forms, and that could link in with some of the outpatient clinics in some respects. Depends on the patient circumstances. There are about 40-odd allied health professionals, including people called, which I mispronounced and got wrong, called percussionists. They're not percussionists, they're perfusionists. But when I first heard the term, that's what I thought. And I couldn't understand what medicine had to do with orchestras. But they are people who operate cardiac machines. And there's about 40 of those different groups, physiotherapists, the rest. There is some podiatry provided there at the moment, very much at the high level, more acute end of things, but with a lot of demand that's not being met. There's the potential for a transport hub, and that is there are elements of that already there, but in terms of if we develop this facility, that might plug us in better to form part of the Te Whatu Ora's shuttle services that go between hospitals, and from a polyclinic to a hospital would make some sense as a base. And the Wellington Free Ambulance is already, well, they're located there, and that also has potential as well, particularly with the work of their paramedics. And there may be some case for developing closer relationship between what their paramedics are doing and what can be done on the polyclinic. Now, this is a range, not exhaustive, pretty much when you look at what goes within some of those subheadings, the sort of areas that we would like to explore in terms of either for the first time, in many cases this would be for the first time, but also in the future, either expanding or introducing for the first time a range of outpatient clinics, mainly in this context by specialists from Wellington in the main. So although it's not a surgical hospital, the role of anaesthetist is actually beyond putting people to sleep and waking them up again. It's actually also in ongoing pain management, and also in preparation to post-operative preparation as well. So there could be a case there. Ophthalmology, they're already doing some stuff there, not for specialists, but for ongoing routine treatment for less serious, or macular degeneration is serious by its very nature, but within that spectrum, comparatively less complex treatment to be provided. That's already happening at the KHC, and the range of other things. There's a bit of mental health being provided by a psychiatrist. Where I've got surgical down there, that's for the outpatient clinics, obviously, orthopaedics, ear, nose and throat, general surgeons, where it could be follow-up. We have these things called first specialist assessments, which is a GP referral to a specialist for further investigation by a hospital specialist. Some of that might be able to be done there. And also the clinical follow-ups that happen as well, following post-operative may well, depending on what makes good clinical sense, happen.
Can I just ask a question for clarity, Ian? What is KFC other than the fried chicken? KFC. You've just Oh, is it KHC? Oh, you've said KFC a couple of times, and I was a little bit confused, that's all.
Okay. I actually don't
Oh, you
like
mean-
Kentucky Fried. I don't
So-
like it. I don't touch it.
It's not a great health thing. So is it Kapiti Health Centre is what you're referring to
I'm
when you
referring
say
to the
that?
Kapiti Health Centre.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, it's an odd combination.
Sorry, just wanted to clarify.
All right. This is just a rough outline of the headings of the different parts. An objective, an introduction, which I've talked about a bit earlier, but expanded on that. Context, including the current services provided in Kapiti, and on KHC. And then looking at the demographic and other trends. And Jackie Cumming, who's on CAG, a Professor of Health Policy at Victoria University, has done some good work on needs analysis, although it needs to be updated, but there's a good starting point there. Health access status and needs. We have these things in the health system you may be familiar with, I'm not sure, but called primary health organisations. And they were established, they're not creatures of statute, they're creatures of policy, but they were established when district health boards were formed. And they're kind of the vehicles that sort of between the district health board and the and general practices. And they allocate the funding according to a formula that the DHB receives to pass on. And when DHBs were disestablished, their role became much more critical, and they're kind of the glue in holding so much of what's being managed to hold together at the moment. I became aware of how much data they've actually got, and it's really impressive, the data that they have. They get the data from the general practices. That data will tell them in each general practice you know, how many patients have high needs, how many patients have diabetes, how many patients require dialysis, a whole spectrum of things, cardiac monitoring, very, very detailed. The thing I'm not quite clear on is whether it has wait times, waiting to get to a GP in particular, but or beyond that, referrals. But it is very, very valuable information, and they are receptive to coming out and actually meeting with a small group of us, which will include myself, Jackie at least, and Gina, and maybe more, about what is the data that we could get from them that we could use, and that would be essentially the guts of it. It doesn't include Otaki, and the reason for that is that it was part of the former Mid-Central DHB and it had a different PHO. But we know the chief executive there, and once we work out what the questions are with Tuora Compass, the PHO here, we can ask the same questions of them. So look at the services currently providing at KHC and new expanded services to form part of the polyclinic, and conclusions and recommendations. Now, the problem, first of all, it goes back to treacle. The more you reorganise and restructure an organisation, the more destabilised it becomes. So Te Whatu Ora, as they acknowledge privately and internally, is dysfunctional. Its culture is top-down, very vertically top-down, more so than the past. And they're operating in a very disruptive environment. And then we have in the severe workforce shortages. Now, I know from the time that when I was working representing salaried medical specialists that the shortages are there. You have to differentiate between shortages and official vacancies. There is a difference of about at least 2 to 1. But for medical specialists, it's about a quarter of shortages, so nearly 25% shortages. With other health professionals, and particularly nursing, it's not at that level, but it's high. And it's everywhere. It's right across those many allied health professionals I referred to before. If you want a good example of the effect of shortages, we have a new hospital building in Auckland at the moment, you might have seen in the news. It's a bit of a takeoff, or it would do a Yes Minister new sketch of the Yes Minister of the hospital with no patients, but very busy staff, and very low mortality rate. This is a hospital that is ready to go in terms of structure and facilities, but it doesn't have staff, so therefore it doesn't have patients. So that, in a way, highlights more than many other things the effect of the shortages. And then there's the rebuilds. And if we start calling this a hospital, we join the queue. And that's a long queue. It's now been revealed through leak, I think they're obtained under the Official Information Act, but we have a third of the hospitals and health facilities are now beyond their design life. And the services are at risk as a consequence. Dunedin Hospital is the biggest, and that's going to cost, the latest costing is 1.7 billion. And that's going to take up to 2029. And then there's other hospitals, and more than just the ones there, that I've got there, Tauranga, Whangarei, Palmerston and North and Nelson. So we've got to avoid that queue. So we're not calling it a friggin' hospital. That's not a statement. Well, that is a statement. It's not a request.
Can we quote you on that?
Yes.
That's where the KFC comes in.
Well, the KFC will drive up the demand further. But we are talking about describing it as it is. It is innovation, so we're calling it, but we're usually using that word because it's a good word to use, and it is what it is, but it's got to be seen to be that as well. Also, integration between that, there's a barrier between community health and hospital. This blends, this provides a structure to cross that divide and have services that cross that divide within it. Te Whātua Ora's, and it's not their fault, their funding streams don't work on the basis of this, so we've got to navigate through that. One-stop shoppish, as I mentioned before, we'll be arguing that it will help constrain pressure. We can't say it would reduce pressure, but we constrain pressure on, particularly on Wellington Hospital, but potentially Palmerston, perhaps Hutt. Now, the bit at the bottom is actually quite critical. OPEX, operational expenditure, and CAPEX, which is capital expenditure. If this goes through the CAPEX route, we're stuffed for the reason of the previous slide. We're at the end of a queue with much bigger facilities than we're talking about. Right. So the more we can argue that this is through operational expenditure, and I've sniffed Te Whātua Ora out on this in terms of the way to go, then that's where we should actually have, that's how we should construct the argument. That this is, if there's any CAPEX expenditure involved, it is right at the end of it, not at the beginning. So we develop a compelling case that comes, and apologies, Martin, there's still a sub sitting there, but it's off the bench, and so it comes here. And assuming it makes the wise decision of adopting it, it goes on to council. And before that process, perhaps, and certainly afterwards, engagement with the wider population of the council. Part of it will be to try and get a level of public, not just public awareness, but public support behind it. That will be very important. And with others, the providers is important, including the general practices, and we have 2 MPs, and also then engaging with Te Whātua Ora. Now I've got Te Whātua Ora at the end of that, and that's deliberate, but there will be some levels of on an as needs basis before in the lead up to it. So the worst thing we want is for them to come to it cold. But the informal feedback I've had from as far as you can go from the top of the place, Te Whātua Ora, is that without having seen it and had a chance to look at the compelling case, that the direction we're proposing is the way to go, and particularly in the context of that focus on operational expenses, operational costs rather than capital costs. So my father said to me once, as trying to provide some advice on how I should conduct my life, was he said to me that if you want to impress people, say something and then say Mark Twain said it. And the reason for that is that no one will actually ever know whether it's true or not. So although it's 99.9% certain he never said this, nevertheless, I'm saying this is what Mark Twain would say.
That's right. It's either him or Oscar Wilde.
No, we'll stick from the 99. Mark Twain.
Nelson Mandela said it. He knows about carpeting at least.
Well, yeah, and it wasn't Oscar Wilde because it'll be a lot more juicy. And Mark Twain was very well read, and he read a bit on New Zealand, so it's just possible. Just possible.
Came here several times.
Did he?
Yeah, he loved it.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Well, he must have fished off the coast.
Oh, Kapiti wasn't around in those days.
They,
That's awesome. Okay, we won't go
he knew
to
the word poly,
debate
though.
the virtues of Mr. Twain. Is that the presentation? Ed?
Yes, it is.
Fantastic. Thank you very, very much for that. I'll just add a couple of quick things. First of all, I'm very excited about this. One of the issues we faced, or certainly faced in the last triennium, is how do we get a hospital up here? You know, we had a 20,000 person petition, and I had envisions of a big, large structure, and then picture was painted to me last year that, no, actually what we're talking about is expanding what we have. I think Gore was an example that was used, that sort of stuff. And all of a sudden, to me, that became a very realistic proposition. My first aspect would be to thank the committee because we legitimised CAG and have empowered them to do the work that they're currently doing. And I see some very, very positive work coming out of this space in relatively short order. I think you guys have been chafing at the bit to get into these sorts of conversations. I guess the first question that I'll potentially lead off with, and actually no, I won't. I'll just go to council officers. Is there anything you want to add to this at all?
I did. Just in really support of the great work that Ian and the team have been doing, I did just want to highlight to you, I'm sure you've already caught up with this, but the government's just announced their 9 targets to be completed by 2030. And the top 2 targets, the first one, well, they both relate to health, but one is that 95% of patients will be admitted, discharged or transferred from an emergency department within 6 hours. And the other one is that 95% of people will wait less than 4 months for elective treatment. So I just wanted to say, as part of the case that Ian and the team will put together, we now have that as a basis to link into, because the current government's intentions are that central government will be spending their whole time delivering against these 9 targets. So in that context, which just came out yesterday, I feel like there's even more opportunity on the table because this is a focus of the government as well. So I think that's a really great starting point for where this discussion is positioned.
I guess the first question off the bat from my end would be, do we have any sort of timeframes on when we're potentially looking at having this case put together? And nothing that you'll be held to, Ian.
Well, I'm not going to say anything I will be held to, but no, it's the treacle factor. And the next big step, I just want to acknowledge, by the way, that the support that Gina and Victor have done here have provided as well. That's been very, very useful. And we may need some more of that, just saying. But I think that personally, I'm a firm believer in there's a beginning, an end, and a non-exhaustive, but somewhat time-consuming, but non-exhaustive middle. And so I would sort of hope that we're in a position to have a compelling case at the very least to the council this year, with a view to later this year, with a view even to actually sending that off to its destination. But there's some ifs and buts in that. And one of the biggest ones is the availability of the PHO to provide us with that data. There's also the writing of it, and I'm sort of starting on that now. the problem is I'm also writing a lot of other things as well. Yeah, so we'll get that underway as well. Yeah. So I'm sort of hoping that we would at the very least complete the compelling case ready to go by and signed off by this year.
That's very exciting, very, very exciting. Open up the floor. Any questions? Nigel?
Yeah, I can congratulate the pragmatic approach. The idea of hospitals just is unlikely to fly, so this looks really good. Couple of questions. One is there's a bit of the build it and they will come philosophy behind this. I talked recently to the Waikanae Medical Centre, and they're 5 doctors light. And if you're a doctor, you would think, what a great place to work. You know, it's like gold. And they're 5 short and having trouble keeping people. So I'm just wondering about that, you know, so that we wouldn't replicate a North Shore situation where we get a fabulous hospital with nobody in it. So I don't know what the process for that is. And then there will be, and I mean, under the current government, it's got to be fantastic for surgeons. Because they want cuts everywhere, so the surgeons will be celebrating. But I just wonder also if you've got a plan for how many dollars the council would be expected to. So is there going to be a financial contribution from council?
In terms of building it, no, that's not that's certainly not how I would see it. I think the cost to council will be the cost of labour, staff time, and that's for it to determine. And we have it on the CAG group itself. We have basically all the capabilities to do it, but not the capacity to do it. Not enough of us. And we're all volunteers, so many of us are doing, well, all of us are doing several other things. So, but no, this is something that would be Te Whatu Ora provided, Te Whatu Ora funded.
Okay. And just the last bit from me, in terms of mental health facilities on the Kapiti Coast are appalling, virtually non-existent. So how much of this are there synergies with the likes of KYS, for instance? So those people who are kind of secondary providers, and KYS is an obvious example, but there's probably lots of others as well. And how do they fit into this?
I should have referred to KYS and which are neighbours in the sense of where the facility is. I would see a close synergy. It's a not-for-profit. It does vital work, impressive work, and there could well be, I mean, I'm only speculating, but there could well be some sort of crossover in terms of treatment of patients, mutual support, in different ways. I'd see a very collaborative relationship. I think the direction of travel of both. I was going to use the word coterminous, but I'm not sure whether coterminous might also mean terminating as well. So, but concurrent, very integrated.
I think Chris might have a word to say.
I did want to just note that one of the things that I think sits really nicely alongside, I'm going to say it's more than early thinking, Ian, because I know that so much work has gone into this, but around the acknowledged shortage of medical practitioners in a variety of fields, as we are looking at whether the Economic Development Kotahitanga Board may also, once this gets going, have some chats with KHAG and others around how do we make Kapiti attractive from a health and wellbeing perspective for business, and is there something that we could be doing to support that? Well, might not be tourism, but there are some things that other areas have been proposing to attract people to their communities, and so it might be, is there an opportunity to bring those things together? So it wouldn't be at this early stage, but it would be something that we're starting to go. Is this something that we could be looking at throwing some I'll say innovation and ideas at to think about how do we compete, because Ian said it's everywhere, but it's also internationally an issue as well. So it's why come to Kapiti, and is it easy to do business here? Is it great to do business here, as well as the Te Whatu order side of things as well?
And sorry, just one other, yeah, one last point was,
Hang on. No.
there we go. Sorry, one last point. In terms of private health, the relationship with private health providers, so on what used to be Whitireia Polytech on the corner of Kapiti Road and Mill Drive, I think it's called Pacific, is it Pacific Health? I think it was designed for a Pacific Island population health, but it's broadened its network. So the relationship with, I think Pacific Radiology is another private provider, but those private providers who are in this space, the relationship with them. So is there one, or is there a plan to develop a relationship with private providers as well? Because it's a tricky area, right?
I've got three things to respond to. I'll leave that one to last because it gives me more time to think about it. But the first one you mentioned also about hospital. Just to be clear on a hospital as well. I mean, that is the way we're not calling it. Also, not calling. We're not just calling it not a. Sorry, we're not calling it a hospital simply because of we want to get it under operational expenses, etc.
Deception.
But also because it really isn't a hospital anyway, in the way that the term hospital is used today. In days gone by, or decades gone by, a hospital was often described as any sort of facility that had beds in it, and often run by local GPs and that, and sometimes called cottage hospitals. They weren't surgical. These days, a hospital really does mean something that is either got surgical or at least got an emergency department, which should not be confused with urgent care. The second thing was on GPs. I think what you've described there, Nigel, highlights the extent of how far shortages have penetrated. And that's not going to be resolved because until such time as the government resolves capitation funding. And that is both how much level of capitation funding, but also that it captures much more than it currently does for high complexity needs of various forms. At the moment, it has a recognition of, for women of what's described as childbearing years, there's an additional supplement in funding, and age, over 65s. My GP tells me his practice actually is coping a bit better because they have quite a number of very healthy, low needs 90-year-olds. Incentivises the funding. But there's a lot more than that. We have more chronic illnesses, all sorts of things. So it's a system. Capitation is a good system, but its formula is in much need of review. You also mentioned about time frames as well. We in a way, the shortages actually are quite useful in a reverse sort of sense because we can't go too far. So that allows us to have a staggered plan. And everything up there depends on staff. And that's why we can't be too specific. But on the private providers, I think it all depends. I mean, you've got to always remember that and this is not a well, you can argue it's a negative, but it's not. I'm not expressing it in that way. The private providers are kind of more boutique in the sense that they follow the market. We have an eye care facility here. It's called a hospital, day hospital. Cataracts. Now, cataracts is very high volume, very easy to do. They're great because they make such a meaningful difference for people. But they're also less complex and they're highly profitable because it's almost like a factory. I don't want to be too derogatory, but you can churn the data through. That's how when we had targets in in the.
Sorry, guys, I'm just going to start saying we need to tighten this up a little bit.
Okay.
We've got a few other questions to be asked as well. Generally, Nigel, we'll be doing getting a picture of what is available in our community, and we'll be addressing the gaps in there as well. Sorry, Ian.
And there will be relationships, though.
Yep.
But they will unfold.
Michael.
Thank you, Ian, and for the dictionary lesson this morning too has been really helpful. The Golden Bay community health example is really quite interesting. It serves quite a smaller community, I think under 6,000 population over there. I guess one of the reasons it got legs is because geographically it's very hard to get between the two, certainly by car anyway, in an emergency. Is that one of the demographic things, let alone the ageing population, that would get this more attention?
I think so. But also, the actual facility is actually, I think it's owned by the PHO, which is a little unusual. I just think it was also the combination of the right people in the right place with the right innovative thinking.
Okay, thank you.
Rob.
Oh, thanks. Through the chair. Oh, Ian, I can see we went to the same college and the same class together, and I can see how Ian was at the sharp end of the class. Full support of your full support of your polyclinic endeavours there, Ian. Hey, just a question. You just said that KHAG are looking more closely at Old Tacky. I know it's in another DHB, but if you could just clarify that and give us a bit of a timeline, would be really good. As ex-chair of Capita Youth Support, we do have facilities in Otaki now, and we've got about 50 staff, of course, in Te Manawai Road, and we're close to the Horitapai medical centre there. Now that was built as a small hospital, was it, in the 60s? That complex there. Could that be renovated and extended into a more of a going concern as a hospital? And I was involved in one of the medical centres in Waikanai there, and it's quite interesting how we had to have a triage area in case of a civil emergency or a major car accident. We had to have a wailing room, which was interesting. Helicopter support, and quite a few things. Also, the pharmacy. There was a public outcry. It's in the middle of a residential area, and of course the locals didn't want it called a pharmacy, so it's just another room onto the medical centre. But it's quite interesting. So the drugs there.
I might take a shot at answering that one if that's okay, Rob. Look, this thing will happen in stages. What we're looking at the moment is an asset we currently have, which is the medical centre over here. The issues we've got with Otaki, obviously, it's in a separate DHB. But there needs to be linkage. I agree 100%. We need to know what's going on in Otaki, and we need to be working all together with regards to the bigger picture of how we're moving forward as a community. What Ian's proposing is a body clinic down this way. Nothing to say that there can't be something looked up at that way, but just not at this stage.
Okay.
That's where we're working with this piece.
And very interesting to see that if we're more than 30k from a hospital, we're in a rural area. So
very interesting. I think Chris wanted to comment on that as well.
Yeah, I did, and just to lean into the phases that you're talking about, Martin, I think Ian did note earlier that what we're trying to do with the polyclinic and this PHO is really get that case on the table and the right questions so that we can then be thinking about that next phase. So it's not that it's not in scope or focus, it's more somewhere between. There's a small group of very talented and experienced individuals in KHAG working with council and others actually on this with some limited or constraints around time as to how much can we do. And so let's put something on the table and have something that we can actually work to before we try and go too big. So that's what I think I heard you saying.
Yeah, and I think we will touch on that in the compelling case. I mean, at the moment we're trying to focus on the facility that's there, and it's the biggest that's there. But we also need to think a bit about Paikakariki as well. And so I think that the other thing with Otaki is that the GPs refer to Palmerston North, and that's actually quite significant. That may change, and there has been some discussions about that, particularly with the expressway makes a difference.
Lovely, thank you, Ian. Ian Holborough.
Thank you. Thank you for developing this compelling case, and I think it's just fantastic so far. I just had a few questions. My first question is, I'll just ask them one at a time. How does the health needs assessment that you carried out feed into this in specific ways as you work through the kinds of services that are going to be needed? I mean, you as in KHAG carried out.
I think, well, first of all, the data is a bit dated, so it's assembling what's the data that's around, that's available. It needs to be updated a bit. But I think that it will tell us a lot about the health status of different population, or the populations within the coast. Hopefully it will tell us where areas of high needs are and the level of those high needs, and where the needs are less but still important. I think the data that will actually take it further, though, will be the data from the PHO.
Right.
Because what they would do, they won't give us they can't, because of confidentiality, give us the breakdown of each particular practice. I saw it in one practice because I was momentarily associated with that practice. And it was really fascinating. But it will tell you aggregated for all the practices from here, Raumati, up to, including Waikanae, but not Otaki. Very specific breakdown. So if you take the areas I had up there on extending the services, pretty much those, I would envisage. Yeah. I would expect that it would identify, well, I would hope it would identify the number of people who have been referred for, say, hip operations, for example. And what will then that enables us to do is to get a sense of the proportion of that per capita, and compare it with contra, and we can develop and compare it with the national average if we can, and we can say, well, we're about the national average, or we are above. Or we are below, but it's still a significant number per capita.
Thank you. So I was just thinking about the recent article about Kinaperu and how the 24/7 is facing closure because it's actually only a handful of people, they say, that access it per night. So that's an example of a service that you would think would be really needed, but in actual fact isn't used. So I just think that we need to be really robust about identifying needs and gaps as we progress with this work. I'm sure you'd agree with that.
Yeah, I do very much, and I think that we need to drill down further on that Kinaperu story, information, and what's behind it. I mean, that is urgent. It's not emergency department, so GP referrals would not go there. GP, if they're referring to a patient to an emergency department, it would be Wellington, because that's where they have the emergency medicine specialists, for example. Urgent care doctors are not emergency medicine specialists. It's a different branch of medicine.
Yeah, right.
Emergency medicine drills down, more subspecialises in that area. So GP referrals come into it, but we need to know other things as well, because it's still an after-hours clinic. And why is the demand so low? Is it because they go elsewhere? I don't know, but we need to know.
The other thing is, I've got two more, if that's right.
Certainly.
The other thing is that we tend to think of it being Kapiti or Wellington, and there's this big facility sitting in the middle, which is Kinaperu, which struggles to find staff and keep its operations going. Is there any thinking around the division of services between Porirua and Kapiti? Because now that Transmission Gully is open, it's been a complete game changer in terms of accessing Kinaperu, but there doesn't seem to be any more conversation around the provision of services for Kinaperu and how they benefit us in Kapiti.
Well, I don't think we've actually had that, to the best of my knowledge, I've only been involved in for about 18 months. Don't believe we've had that conversation, certainly in recent times. It could be, but then it is doing a different purpose in a way. They do have surgery there, day surgery. They have a range of other outpatient clinics and things there as well. So it's a different sort of hospital. And the connection with Kenny Peru may not, I'm not sure, Janet, I'm just sort of assuming that in terms of the clinical connection, it may be more relevant for from here to Wellington rather than from here to Kenny Peru because of the different nature of the hospitals.
May I make a suggestion that we can come back to you? Because I think, Ian, you've given some top of mind, which is very helpful, but maybe when we come back with the compelling case, we can have considered that and be able to give you a bit more detail on that, if that sounds all right.
Sounds fantastic. Just one more little point, tiny little point. You were with us when we went to Selwyn and saw that incredible facility.
No, I wasn't actually.
You weren't there? Chris was there and Darren was there. We didn't see the inside of it, but a council-built medical centre. Have you done much work looking at how councils feed into this kind of project elsewhere in the country yet? Is that something you're going to be doing, building the case?
Well, we're not working on the basis that it's council funded, but I think that...
It's just an example.
I know, and I appreciate that. I think the only one that I'm aware of, which goes back many years, that has got to that stage is in Oamaru Hospital. And I know that because when they went on their own, it was the council essentially took over the hospital that was previously by whatever the health structure was at the time, based in Dunedin. It might have been a Crown Health enterprise. And they had a name that I can't quite recall, but it was very close to the word latte. And somewhere one of those L's must have been for local government. So they actually owned the hospital, I know they started off with some surgery there, but over time that ceased. The last thing I heard about that is that the council want to give it back to Whātua. I'm not quite sure why. That was just in the news quite recently. In terms of around the country, I've not heard of that kind. I'm aware of the Selwyn one because Martin's described it, but I'm not aware of anything else to that level. I know that a lot of local councils are keen, become increasingly aware of the importance of them providing a health voice. And you can go to Dunedin Hospital. It was the city council that campaigned to improve the funding for the Dunedin Hospital. So there's a recognition of a role, but I don't think it's got, with the exception of Selwyn, I'm not aware of anything else that's got the point of actually building or intending to build a facility.
Yeah, I guess it was just an example. What I'm keen to see as the group builds the case is some benchmarking and analysis of what other councils have done, what succeeded, what hasn't, that kind of thing. I think that would be quite useful. Just a suggestion.
Oh, look, council officers can note that one. That's no troubles at all. Okay.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you.
No troubles at all. Look, that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Ian. Love the presentation and good questions. Looking forward to seeing how this all develops. Thank you. Right. Just want to acknowledge our Mayor, Janet, at the table, and also the rival of our CE, Darren Edwards, as well. Great to see you here. Thank you very much. Hara, see you over there too. Sorry? Oh, look, yes, we're just going to do a quick recommendation, noting that we've received this update from Ian from CAG, that's pretty much all it. Could I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Kathy. All those in favour? Cool, and I'll leave it up to council officers to just word that accordingly, if you're all okay with that. You can add on those other four sub things I was going to put in there as well. Rightio, 8.1, if I could ask for the update for our housing group. We have Darren and Stephen and Chris here. Great to see you guys at the table. The floor is yours.
Hi, we are actually reporting back today. So at a previous Social Sustainability Committee meeting, you had talked about a desire to engage Kāinga Ora and some other central government departments around social housing, and in particular some of the challenges we have in our district. So today's briefing is really just checking in on that and some opportunities that have come out of a conversation with Kāinga Ora and the next steps that we're planning to take. So the Mayor and the Chair of this committee were at that meeting, so apologies if some of it is something that you've heard. Feel free to add to the conversation, but really we just wanted to give a bit of an update to this group about where that's heading. So I will hand over to Stephen and he's going to brief us.
Good morning. So there was a meeting was held with Vicky McLaren. She's the Regional Director for Kāinga Ora and Wellington Kapiti District. Items that were raised during the meeting included, we briefed you on the issues around the Kapiti Rapid Rehousing Advocacy Service earlier, and that issue was raised with Kāinga Ora. Kāinga Ora isn't the funder of that service or a potential funder, but indicated support for that kind of service, and an indication that the funding responsibility would really sit with the MSD and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. So the support was voiced by Kāinga Ora for that kind of service. There was a conversation as well about wait list management and allocation of housing, and particularly the issues of recent developments in Otaki and an awareness that those houses have been allocated to people who came from outside of the district. So there was an agreement that there should be further meetings called a meeting with a wider group, Kāinga Ora, Ministry of Housing and Urban Development and MSD, to look at both those issues and discuss that, but really with an intent to look closely at how the allocation system works, how the role of Kāinga Ora fits with the MSD housing register. Kāinga Ora have their own processes that should fit with community and neighbourhoods. So there was some conversation about what had happened in those recent cases. So the next step will be for a letter to be, I'm drafting a letter to Vicky McLaren, but also will be contacting the MSD and MHUD and arranging a meeting.
I might just add to that to say we're drafting a letter from the Mayor, so it'll be coming to the Mayor, because we think the real benefit of engagement and bringing entities to our district is that it is a very formal invite that we're putting out because it's a large issue for us. So we are proposing that regional commissioners from both sides of our district would be invited from MSD. MHUD has a different arrangement, so it will be their lead and Kāinga Ora's lead. I just do want to add that Vicky did offer some disappointment around how the allocation of housing into Otaki. So that was 5 houses, new social housing opportunities, went to 5 whānau from Porirua. And she said to us that she was disappointed that it had landed that way, and that is not what was meant to have happened. So she's actually going back to Kāinga Ora to understand how that's, I'll say, played out, and how they made the decisions that ended up in that allocation. So we are going to hear back from that, and I think the important thing about this engagement is that we are able to put forward some real life examples and situations and get return feedback on that. It isn't just a meeting to say hi. We're actually putting our issues forward, and around the wait lists, we're really suggesting we be a pilot to get an actual comprehensive view of demand for social housing, which is not held by any one agency at the moment, including the fact that we have our own, obviously, elder persons housing. We maintain that list. So none of those lists are complete. And so we're going to be looking to get that so that when we look at need, we actually start from a more comprehensive base. So we're not going to get it fixed or right in 2 seconds, but I think the really pleasing thing about this conversation is that we're one step forward towards getting that sort of hui together to land that list and then talk about how allocation occurs. So I might pause there.
Fantastic. At the end of the presentation as such.
So,
look, I have Kim online. I'll just go with her first, Nigel, if you don't mind. Kim.
Kia ora. So very happy to see this coming over the table. We've been having these conversations with Kāinga Ora, MSD, NZ Police Corrections for quite some time now. And reading her letter, I haven't got it in front of me, sorry, but it mentioned something about, we'll go and see why that process didn't happen. So the issue we have, so our Oranga team holds some housing ready to rent kind of workshops to educate people on how they can get rentals and you know what they can do. And so what some of the feedback is, some of them don't even know that they can get on that list one. The other half of that problem is that people are disheartened by being on that list and not getting anywhere too. So the thing is that people aren't even registered, and that is the issue. I think we also need to tackle this from all fronts. We have that housing forum that we've started working with all the Crown agencies that have anything to do with housing, so we need to raise it again there. And because we're building some good relationships there, we also need to be mindful of it when we're going into our sustainable social capability needs assessment that we're about to launch into. That wraps up part of it. So there's already been work done in that space. So using the information that we already got, but rather than reinventing the wheels, we have a lot of information already and our housing needs assessment that we did. And in terms of Ōtaki, we really need to be looking at getting to that ground roots detail and those stories that you're talking about, Chris. So we've already got forums in place where we can start getting that data, and we're just about to start implementing our housing strategy. And the first part of that is obviously talking to whānau and getting these stories. And that came back off the back of the housing needs strategy that Kapiti Coast District Council did way back when. And so from that, we've been able to progress and have these little workshops where we can tap into that. So this for us is really important. I'm sure it is for everyone, but we've been fighting this fight for quite some time. So I'd really like to make sure that we take a joined up approach so we can tap in and leverage off the existing relationships that we've got. Aroha mai, I may have to jump out of this hui early because I've got a hui with Whakakotahi in about 10 minutes. But I just wanted to say that. Kia ora.
Kia ora. And look, Kim, just take... Oh, sorry. Chris is going to respond back.
Yeah, I just want to say that absolutely appreciate those points, Kim. And I think when we're talking about get everyone around the table, iwi has to be there as well, so that we're making sure that we've got that full picture. So we're very aware, even in our own waiting list for older people's housing, that our kaumatua are underrepresented, as in they too have not or are not registered on our list. So we need that full picture to come to the table, and that will be an important part of that. So absolutely endorse the comments you've made.
Could I also ask you, Kim, we're going to be winding up at 11:30. Is there anything you wanted to touch on the members' business? Sorry, guys, I just touched base while Kim. Is there anything you specifically wanted to touch on with members' business at all?
No, that was all I had for today. But and Toe took all the comments around KHEG, and we need to be looking at our Kapiti services. One thing I might add to the KHEG presentation, I might have missed it, is that again a joined up approach, because there's work happening in all the spaces. In all our 3 little communities, and we just, rather than reinventing the wheel, we just need to tap into that. So hopefully we can, we had a discussion around that before, Martin, and
Yeah, we
hopefully
did.
can
And
put that in
yeah,
that.
very much to see that on ongoing conversation as well. And it doesn't disappear off the table at all. But that's certainly where I see things heading. That's great. Coming back to you, Nigel.
Yeah, my note actually was that Kim a year ago was warning about this, that you get this a dislocation of people, and there's no disparagement whatsoever about the people who have gone in there, but they've been, presumably there must be at least some whānau connection, because you wouldn't just uplift people from one community and pop them into another community because they're on a list. It's people live in the real world once they get there, right? So, yeah, being involved and Ngā Hapu being involved, I think it's absolutely vital, because otherwise that's what we'll get, these dislocated communities, and people just won't feel like home because they won't know anybody.
100%.
And that doesn't mean that you can't take people from out of the district, but if you know that, then maybe there's a few things that we have to do in order to bring those people into the community more. Do you know what I mean?
I think that was part of Kāinga Ora's disappointment, was the point that if people are being brought in, that they would need extra support. And I think internally they hadn't had a discussion about that, or how that was landed. So we hope to hear more about how that's been managed, but also how we can be leaning into our own wait list before we look outside.
Fantastic. Lawrence.
Just a question, 2.3 in your thing, you talk about this issue of positioning people by priority on a wait list, not necessarily locals, but by priority on a wait list. Implied in that is that Kāinga Ora doesn't prioritise locals at the moment. Is that right?
I've looked at their policies and procedures, and they do look at fit within a community, but the owner of the housing register is MSD. So MSD have a process of allocating the priority, and then there's another layer of, there's a process of talking with applicants that Kāinga Ora does, but they would have to justify why the priority person, who might be from outside the district, wasn't offered a tenancy, and why another person was. And I think that probably was the concern about the process that had happened. It looked as if they hadn't been following their own policy or procedure.
Okay, so you're reassuring me that the internal policies are set for locals as priority?
It's part of the consideration, but I don't think it's an overriding consideration.
Okay, so that's a no.
Yeah.
The internal policies don't prioritise locals.
I think there's an intention that you're meant to prioritise local, and that's what they're meant to be doing through their process.
But something else might.
There's an opportunity for there to be some grey space, which has obviously happened in this situation, where
For all 5?
well, that's why we're getting some feedback around how has that worked, because that seemed to be a surprise for our regional director, and she was going to go back and have a look into it, because what should have happened is an assessment of local opportunity and need should have had trumped somebody else coming in. That's essentially the conversation we had. So it'll be good to see where that's broken down. So I think what Stephen's saying is, from a Kāinga Ora perspective, this is what's meant to play out. But then there's MSD's process and the two coming together, and how that's filtered down to people outside the district getting priority. So all it would take at MSD was to have a national process for determining priority, which means that it's not district that's the focus, but it's based on your assessment of need of the individuals, to mean that the two processes don't line up. So that's what we want to understand a bit better, is how that's working together and how we make sure that a comprehensive view is on the table, because we're not sure it is.
Cool. Do you feel that our pushing on this is going to result in a change in that?
Yes.
interaction
Yes.
between MSD and KO?
Yes.
I'll tell
Or
you
are we
why.
going to have the same issue happen again,
No,
again and again?
I
We-
think.
Sorry. No,
I was
go.
going to say, I think if we had the right people in the room to have a conversation about it, and I am going to go back to the safety hui that we had in Otaki, is getting everybody in the room to talk about the different things that they're trying to do, and just awareness of what's happening was a massive step forward. Because we have two parts to our district, we have from a central government perspective, just like health, we have two ex-DHB areas. For police, we have two areas. For MSD, we have two areas. So they aren't always talking to each other about what's happening. So technically speaking, it might be that from their regional perspective, Porirua and Kapiti are in the same zone, or Taki is in a different zone, or they might be looking at it as one collective. So we just need to understand how they've interpreted that, because we're looking at our district and going, we want you to do stuff in our district. They're not necessarily using the same boundaries as we are. And we are arguing that they don't have the full list either of need in this district. So if we were piloted as an opportunity to actually look at that together, and maybe for local government to have some input to this process, that might actually help ensure that the intention of local being able to get to be assisted actually lands. So my view, and I think the conversation we've had is maybe the execution or implementation of that's perhaps where it's falling down.
So, from my perspective, I don't have to be so nice. With regards to things, so from my perspective, we've done the high-level stuff. This is us getting closer to the rock face. It's quite interesting when you start putting scrutiny on these things, as you'd appreciate, with regards to getting result. That scrutiny is just starting. It's not going to go away, and if anything, it'll more than likely increase. We've declared the issues that we've got. We've talked, and again, this is where the housing needs assessment was great. You know, we were able to put some facts in front of them and say, look, we've invited you guys to build houses here because we've proven the need, and here you are not putting our people in there, and that's not acceptable to us. And it was, that was a pretty blunt conversation. So we're following up on that, which I think's a good thing with regards to our advocacy role in this space. Because someone needs to be held to account here, and to me, we're the right people to be holding them to account. With regards to pushing this through, and we'll be reporting back on the group will be reporting back on the progress in that space as well. As such, I think it's an excellent step, but one that's just a start, because we just got to keep that pressure on and keep applying it. And as Chris and the team have alluded to, it's sometimes they don't even know the government doesn't necessarily even know what's specifically going on. With their policy setting might be a certain way, but the question is how is discretion being used and how it's being applied, and that's where the scrutiny aspect comes in. Excuse me, Kathy, if you can just quieten down, please, will just be much appreciated. As such, we'll get to you in just a moment. So yeah, I think we're heading very strongly in the right direction in this space, with regards to holding to account the right people who can actually make some effective change in policy and stuff. But we certainly won't be stepping back from that conversation at all. Sorry, was there anything else you wanted to add to that? Cool, that's great.
Great. Can I just have a follow-up? It's related to KO while these guys are in the room. Just something for me to highlight as an issue that continues to be an issue in our community.
TKO?
To KO, to Kaiang Ora.
Oh, sorry, yes. Yep.
Yeah, not TKO. Technical knockout. Yeah, no. Yeah, KFC. I could put an F in there, everyone will understand what I mean. Just to highlight, we continue to have a problem in our district of KO as a terrible landlord. So highlighting in your conversations, what can we do to add pressure there? Because they're meant to be landlord of their social housing, right? My understanding from a good landlord, if you have a tenant say, I've got an issue with my hot water, it's the landlord's issue to then sort that out, right?
Yep.
That is not happening here locally. It is being pushed back to tenants to sort out their own housing issues. And it's direct from the police who are interacting with currently tenants here who have problems with their hot water, KO says, you've got to sort it out yourself and then come to us with the solution. And I go, that's not their responsibility. So we've got some questions there. So can I highlight that in your conversations with KO? They need to work on their ability as a landlord. If they're going to push pressure on private landlords, they need to do a better job themselves.
Noted. Definitely noted.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, who's next? Thank you. Kathy.
Apologies, Mr. Chair. Rob and I were just sorting out KO. No, just wondering, and I may have missed it, but with the new developments in Parapara Umu, and I understand there's some apartments going up in Otaki, like the ones on Kavadi Road and Ihakura Street, do Kainga Ora purchase some of those apartments rather than build their own, so to house people? Did that come up in conversation at all?
They do have the ability to buy from a developer
They do.
rather than build their own. Yes.
Do you know if they're purchasing any of them because of the housing shortage here in Kavadi? And I know there's some going up in Otaki as well.
We know they're always looking for opportunities because our conversations with them. We're not sure of the number, but we do know that they actively look for opportunities.
I think we should be pointing out some opportunities to them, maybe than waiting for them to make a decision. That was all. I'm just trying to get people help, that's all. Yeah.
I think that would conceivably be wrapped up into the conversation around the actual wait list, because we have been involved in some work with Kāinga Ora, where they've been adding to the picture the developments that are underway and where they fit in that and how much they think they need to do in this district. And so we think it's important to have the right evidence to base to say, here's the actual need, and now how does that line up to that picture? And you will, of course, understand that they give their advice to ministers on where they think nationally they need to invest. So it's a really important point you're raising of opportunity, but I think we also, on the other side of it, need to be able to ensure that the right evidence is being used around need.
And I do think the housing needs assessment was a really useful tool in raising the whole issue of the need for Kāinga Ora through, and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development to be much more active in Kapiti.
Nigel.
Here's an observation around that. Because we are a consenting authority, if we were recommending that you go buy from Charlie's development, then that might get interesting. If we had a policy, if we developed a policy around what they were doing in Queenstown, for instance, where we said to developers, if you're going to have a development that's going to have X number of houses, then we want a percentage of those to be, our policy is that a percentage of those will be social housing. But that's a policy argument. I just wondered, presumably Kāinga Ora don't just use a dartboard to figure who goes where, so they will have some hierarchy of needs that they will have developed. So A, do we have access to that? And B, do we have our own hierarchy of needs that we've determined that should put people on a priority, and then how those two could merge or how those two might marry up?
I suppose there's a few agencies involved in that hierarchy of need, because there's the MSD assessment of priority, and then there's the policies and procedures that Kāinga Ora use. I've got copies of their policies and procedures and how they're supposed to be implemented. But there is, I think, that issue of if there's any discretion, how that works, and how there's that tension between MSD and KO around priority.
I also just wonder about our own, because when we, we have a waiting list for our older person's housing, and it's not necessarily the person at the top of the list that gets the first thing, because there's, So presumably we have a set of criteria by which we make those judgments. And I'm just thinking, if we were able to develop that criteria to overlay this. So, for instance, I think if Kim was involved in the conversation with Kāinga Ora, and had that as a tool, then Kainga would go, well, actually, I think we might be on unsafe ground putting 5 people from Porirua up here. Do you know what I mean?
I guess that's part of starting to join up these conversations. You know, if Kim's with her group, she's a part of this committee, she's hearing the information at the moment, if she can highlight those issues at that meeting, the meetings that we have, the issues are highlighted, maybe meetings that Lawrence is having through some other roles that he's had, us highlighting those issues as well, then it's up to us really, in my opinion, to be should we say, the pointy end of the stick with regards to that advocacy, because we don't have any vested interest other than the welfare of our community. I would hate for people that are perhaps reliant on funding and from those institutions to be having to front foot that sort of conversation, puts them in a very, very precarious position, whereas we aren't in that situation, and we have the information and the skill sets to back it up. Such, and I think that's where we're moving to. That would be my thought, and it'd be very interesting to see where hopefully we are in maybe a year or a year and a half's time with regards to the scrutiny aspect of setting up the systems of accountability as well. Chris?
I just want to pick up on the first point you made around what I'm going to term inclusionary zoning, and tonight there's an opportunity to talk about where that fits in our district plan program for the next couple of years. So that is going to be something we talk about as our next steps for PC2, because it was one of the items that was on the list, and that's now in the diary for a chat. So we'll look forward to talking to you about that.
Cool. Thanks, lovely. Rob?
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Martin. Just hearing Lawrence's concerns from the police about the the dysfunctional activities of Kaingaroa, and seeing in Old Taki the new inhabitants of the houses there. They're not even in the same DHB, they're from Porirua. Could we have Kaingaroa actually come here and have a briefing with us at some stage so we can express our concerns directly to them? I mean, it's an ongoing thing and nothing's really been done about it. And I would put my full confidence in Darren and Stephen here and the way they run the older people's housing, and perhaps they could have an overview of these areas and make some pretty severe recommendations to Kaingaroa immediately. Thank you.
Yep, and just noting also, Rob, that we actually are in that process. That was the point of the meeting in the Mayor's office. It was to start holding them to the groundwork with regards to holding Kaingaroa to account for their decisions in these spaces. No, I guess it's like all things. You've got to be, I think, strategic with regards to the approach. In other words, we don't want to be just doubling up meetings for the sake of meetings when we've got the, should we say, the hard hammers at that meeting, asking the things need to be, and then reporting back to this committee on how that meeting went as such. Some of the underlings, maybe, some of the other parts who perhaps run things on a day-to-day basis, maybe that's something we can set up here and have a conversation about, that they potentially, we do get them to come in and report back as part of whatever process for accountability that we end up deciding on as such. But do take your point with regards to the urgency of having this needing to be addressed.
I did just want to remind the committee that Kaingaroa and MHUD do come to see us effectively every 6 months, more to share what they've got on the go and what is happening. Given the change of government and the fact that they're under review presently, Bill English's review of Kaingaroa, they have yet to have confirmation, well, that's yet to be finished, but confirmation of the direction that's recommended that they'll be taking. And it may be once they have that, it would be useful to have them come to this forum so that we can understand how we might work together. I will use this word, and I know that Mayor did react to it, but Vicky did use the word enabling at one stage in our meeting. And I think that the reason there was a reaction was the point that we need action and we need funding to make things happen here, not just another group that's there to try and enable. So that was in the construct of CHIPS though, and the government's already talked about, I think, wanting more support for local, and there being a lifting of what's able to happen in the local space, rather than Kaingaroa necessarily being the arm that is doing everything. So that will be interesting.
Can I just clarify that comment around enabling? I think my comment was, there's a whole lot of people who say they're going to enable other people to do stuff, but at some point, somebody actually has to do stuff.
Yes, that's the fun games of it. Rightio, if there are no other questions, I'll wind this one up. I just wanted to thank the housing team. I'm looking at the minutes from the last meeting. The navigator role was needing to be addressed. I'm under the impression some bridging finance has been put in place in regards to that, and that we're looking at engaging with him directly with regards to looking at sponsoring that position. So thank you very much. And also just a conversation we've just had now, that was captured also in the last minutes. So thanks for addressing that as well, but needing to keep the foot on the throat, so to speak, and keep this conversation.
Yeah, on the throat. That's
Yeah,
all.
yeah, nah.
Martin,
in the nicest possible way. I'll be wearing my slippers at this stage versus my hobnob boots. Just a little recommendation has been passed to me here that the Social Sustainability Committee note the Kāinga Ora housing update. If I could have a mover for that. Yep. Thanks, Nigel. And Michael, is that a seconder? All those in favour?
Right.
Aye. That's passed. Thank you very much.
Sorry,
Julian?
Martin, can I just make a
Yes.
comment? Because we haven't met since, but I thought the meetings that we had with the older persons inhabitants, what's the term?
Hold on.
Inmates, residents, was fabulous. So the feedback was, and actually the reason I want to raise it here is that the feedback from the people who live in those houses about the service that they get was fabulous. It was like really, really good. So I just wanted to pass that on formally because it was really positive.
I do feel a need just to acknowledge that other parts of the organisation manage the older person's housing. So Kelvin, who comes in and chats, and Lynn. So we just want to make sure we've acknowledged them around the change that we're talking about. Definitely our team has been involved, but it's a whole of organisation, yay, moment.
Yeah, that's a very good point there, Nigel. Very good point. That's it. Thank you very much. Right. Zooming along quite nicely in a very constructive way. Too right. Well, nothing wrong with a bit of expressive thinking. Rightio, I'm going to come back to, actually no, we'll do 9.1, confirmation of the minutes. Does anyone have any thing that needs to be corrected in the minutes as such? Nope. If I could have a mover for that. Rob, and Lawrence is a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much. That's confirmed. I just want to come back now to members' business, which is 7C, members' items. In the agenda, bear with me for a second. Sorry.
Page 5.
Okay. Right, anyone got anything they want to bring up?
Yeah.
Nigel, fire away.
Right, okay. A couple of things. One is the CAB funding, which I understand is in hand, and we're going to have some conversations around that. So just wanted to keep that bubble going.
Is it with an update at the moment, or you're just quite happy to keep that nudging along?
Yeah. Just again reiterating the importance of CAB, the importance to the community, the importance of the work that they do, and if they didn't do it, we had to do it. It would probably cost. Well, it would cost a lot more because you've got a really highly skilled workforce who are free at the moment with CAB. So if we had to bring those services back in house. And it's worth noting that we're the only council that isn't funding CAB. So there's that. The other one is I've been getting all sorts of, no, I was going to say drama. It's not drama. The Lions who collectively have raised $750,000 for our community, and it stays in the Kapiti community, the books. So we've had all the drama about the Raumati pool. they're looking for a house or a home, you know, somewhere to sort out these 25 to 30,000 books. And at 5 o'clock this morning, when I woke up with a brilliant idea, as I often do, until you find out a couple of hours later it wasn't that brilliant at all, but this one I think is good. The ideal location would be, I think, the empty building that we own on the main road in Waikanae that we paid a handsome sum for, and it's sitting there. And I know that the bulldozers are going to do their business at some stage, but until they do, this would be actually the perfect location because it's only across the road from the Memorial Hall. So if that is available, that would solve a whole lot of problems until we're able to sort out a more meaningful solution. Anyway,
I'm under the
my
impression
member's
they're sitting
business.
in the building in Utahanga at the moment.
Yeah. Otaria
Sorry,
Park, yeah.
Otaria Park.
Yeah.
As such.
But they can't sort them down here. A big part of books is sorting them. You just chuck them all in the room and say, help yourselves.
Oh, I'm sure that can be taken offline and we can explore that a little bit further.
And also their next big sale is on the 11th of May. So hopefully they can get rid of a lot as well. But anyway, just throwing that out there.
Cool, thank you. Anyone else got anything they'd like to bring up at all? Janet?
Yeah, I just wanted to congratulate staff on the older persons hui that was held last week. Really great turnout of an amazing range of stakeholders from the older persons community, and a great start to our implementation plan on the older persons approach. Also, another really good youth hui a week or two before that, with lots of people here, and it will be a really useful forum as we develop the youth approach as well.
I'll just flag that I wasn't actually aware of that particular hui, the older person's one. Would have been nice to have had an invite or been aware of it. I don't know how that slipped through the cracks.
Yeah, no, I just so you,
Yeah, all right, get the message. I get the message.
No, I actually do think it was deliberate because I was really only there to say hi, welcome, and the important thing was to leave it to the community and not have elected members there. I think that was the thinking.
Even from that perspective, I do appreciate what you're saying, Mihoru, that the being able to pop in and just let them know that you're on top of what's going on, because I know that there's been, that didn't happen when this came to the table last year, and a lot of damage control was done at that point as such there as well. So it'll be nice to have touched base in that space too.
Cool. Well, there will be others, so we'll make sure that that you or the whole committee are invited. You or the whole committee.
Yeah. Sorry.
Who are you suggesting should be invited?
I would have appreciated an awareness or an invite onto it as chair.
Just the chair. Cool. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, we don't want to drown them. That if there's going to be an interaction, it could be a bigger invite going out. But as chair, so it brings me up to something I wouldn't mind just touching on. Perhaps Mihoru, you could help us with this. We've got working groups, if you like, under our committee, one of them being CAG. We've just had a presentation from here today. We've also got other groups like the Older Persons Council and the Disability Group as such. And there's been conversations about where they may sit in the organisation or under the committees that they may sit. And it's been suggested that they could sit under our committee. I just wanted to know where potentially that's at or what the process is to enable that to happen as such from a formal perspective. Because I do feel that those committees are feeling a little bit like they're out in the open at the moment, and it'll be just nice to bring them into the fold potentially, but I'll be interested in some comment on that. Kathy?
Oh, yeah, it's just that I'm council's representative on the Older Persons Council and the Disability Group. And I agree with you. I think, yeah, even if a report or something came to this committee from the Older Persons Council and the Disability Group, and yeah, I think the Disability Group needs a bit of more structure or something to it. I'm not quite sure what, but we'll work on it. Norie's now been just appointed there, so I'll have a chat to Norie. But it would be good so that, you know, not only this community is up to date with what is happening around them, but also the community who's interested and who watches this.
Oh, look, I agree.
What council is doing, and it gets it more out there.
Yep.
So yes, I agree. But did you want just a verbal report, or are you looking for a written report?
I'm looking for a process at the moment. At the
For a
moment,
process,
the groups aren't sitting, as far as I'm aware, under a committee. I could be wrong on that.
No, but
so
it should come. They should come here.
that would be my thought,
Yes,
but I
yeah.
don't want to predetermine per
So
se.
we need a,
But
the mayor was just to
yeah.
talk. So we need a process around that.
yeah, perhaps the mayor would care to comment on that.
Yep, sure. That was the intention at the start, but I just don't think we've managed to implement it. So I'm going to be looking at the delegations in the near future and bringing a paper to council anyway, so it could be formalised that that's the vehicle for that to happen. But that would be just part of the piece of work. We'd need to work out how that happens, when it happens. We need to also talk to those groups, get their level of comfort and what they would prefer. So, but I think it definitely would provide a nice, open, transparent way that they could share their work.
Well, it's wanting to give
Yeah.
what's the word I'm looking for here? Validity, I suppose, to their processes as well, so that they've got a process. They know that there's a pathway for them to send information in, but also to be following up and querying the responses as well.
But I think it's a great point, and I'll follow it up.
Appreciate that. Thank you. If there's any way even to just lead into that with the perhaps even like you said, having a chat to the group, see whether they are interested or happy with that approach, just so that they know that there's something in the pipeline. I think could be great too, and happy to pop along to those meetings just as chair, just to say hi, sort of thing, if need be as well. But appreciate, Kathy, you've been in those positions for a little while now. I think you were in those last year as well, and sort of stuff. So appreciate your ongoing work in that space. Lawrence.
Did you add the youth council to that list?
Yep.
Because it's one of the things that I don't see a visibility of youth council coming across
That's
any
a
of
fair
our
call.
committees, and I think that's a really important
Janet,
part
did you pick that up? The youth council perhaps in that bracket as well.
just visibility of youth council and what they're discussing and their feelings about stuff. We just don't see that at all.
Yeah, bridleways, cycleways, pathways, sort of stuff. I'm thinking that might be more environment. I'm not sure, but they don't have too many underneath them. That sort of stuff. So it'd be nice to share the load a little bit as well.
Yeah, good thought, Lawrence, and yeah, generally a good idea, I think. So we'll follow it up.
Lovely, much appreciated. I'm just having a quick look at members' business from the minutes of the last meeting. We've talked about age concern. We've ticked that off. Members discussed progress on the social needs assessment. That's just ticking along with regards to CAG. Johnny, you just talked to the Kāinga Ora liaison group, that sort of stuff up Raumati Way. Is there anything back on that at all? Or is that just sort of?
I've just received an email just now, actually.
Oh, really?
So we're going to be meeting again soon. There has been sort of, I can't actually access the file for some reason, but there's some notes there that I can't see regarding their due diligence. So I'll
So you'll be able to report back at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That's great to know. Perhaps make a note of that. And Kathy, you were asking about progress on an indoor sports and recreation centre. Really? But I'm under the impression that a report has been completed, and we're just waiting to receive that. Is that correct?
I had a word with Kathy the other day. Yep. So it's going to SLT next week, and then it'll come to this committee on the 9th of May, whenever the next meeting is. So it's in the agenda for that. So you should see it soon. Yeah, there we go.
Woohoo! And my next question would be around was actually around the community centre, with regards to the piece of work there, how that's progressed. Is that in a similar position as that case study as such? Are we expecting a report back? That was the community centre. Is there a report coming in? Is that next Tuesday workshop? Fantastic. That's great to know. Things rocking along. That's absolutely brilliant to hear. Yeah. Which is a good step forward in that space. Whew. Good old daylight savings as well. So look, that looks like that's about us. I'm going to finish off with a closing karakia. Kia tau ngā manakitanga ki runga I a tātou katoa. Kia hua, e te mā ki I ki ana. Kia tau te kupu, kia tau te reo, kia tau te wainui, actually butchering this, my apologies, katoa te Māori, ki rioto I a mātou mahi katoa, I tēnei rā, hui tākie. Hui tākie. I shall practice that one and do a lot more smoother rendition at next time. So may blessings be upon us all and our business be successful so that our words endure and our language endures. May the spirit be strong, may Māori be settled in balance. Among the activities we will do today, join, gather and unite forward together. That's very nice. And on that note, oh, lovely. Yep. Carl's done that for a couple of the ones on me as well. So with that, I shall call the meeting to an end. We have enough time for a cup of tea, and I just note that there's an 11:30 briefing on Tikatai Kapiti as well. Thank you all very much for your attendance, and for those online, thank you.